What's up everyone? I got another special video for you guys. I got my hands on the Samsung Galaxy S4 yet again, and we're going to take a look at it, see how it holds up in the later part of 2018. Now, a lot of things have changed for Samsung, especially throughout 2018, but I figured I'd do an updated review just because, a lot of phones are coming out. Maybe you guys currently own a Samsung Galaxy S4, but dude, it's kind of fun to look back. You guys got to give me that. You guys can't give me too much flack about it. Now, this phone did come out in March of 2013, so this phone is actually over 5 years old, and honestly, looking at it from the front, it doesn't look extremely dated, but when you feel it, you can tell, this phone definitely does not feel that premium. I alluded to this in another video, but if a phone manufacturer released this phone today, hey, we're gonna release this phone and it feels like this, it would definitely not fly. But at the time, it definitely didn't feel that unpremium. It was definitely a premium phone because a lot of phones at the time still weren't, they were mostly built out of plastic. Very few phones are made out of full glass front and the back and felt premium. I think HTC was the leading at the time just because they had aluminum phones, but and obviously so did iPhone. But this phone came out at a time where Samsung was still doing plastic removable backs, so you were able to remove the back and put in a new battery or removable storage, put in some more storage. So that was super cool, and I'm glad they kept that for at least one more generation after this. This is one of the last phones with a removable back from Samsung, so that's kind of sad, but it is what it is. But another cool thing about this phone is that it does have a Super AMOLED 1080p 5-inch display on the front. I'll be completely honest, okay? I'm not gonna say it's the best panel or anything like that because it isn't, but it's surprisingly still pretty decent. Now, I'm not a fan of TouchWiz. I think it's just so childish. It just makes me feel like I have a 5-year-old, but the panel really isn't too bad, I'll be honest, and that's probably one of the better aspects of this phone. The PPI is 441, so like I said, it's not bad at all. It's pretty surprising. Now, one bad thing about this phone is that it doesn't have any IP67, IP66 dust and water resistance, but again, this phone came out in 2013, so I won't really expect too much. I'm not going to give it too much flack because it is a phone that came out so long ago. Now, one of the weirdest aspects of Android phones in general would definitely be software updates. Now, the Samsung Galaxy S4 is no exception. It came out with Android 4.2.2 Jelly Bean, and you are able to get Android 5.0.1 Lollipop, which is what I have currently on it. And this is why it's kind of strange because on stock, you are only able to go up to Android Lollipop, which is extremely dated at this point. But when you root it in custom ROM it, I believe the last ROM I saw for it was a Android Nougat ROM 7.0, but I could be wrong, and there could be Android Oreo ROM out for it now, or even an Android Pie ROM. This phone was pretty popular at the time, so I'm pretty sure there's still a pretty big development community behind it. You do have access to custom ROMing it and rooting it and flashing whatever ROM you want on it. So I'll definitely recommend, if you want to have a strange experience of rooting and custom ROMing and all this stuff, the Samsung Galaxy S4 is not a horrible option in terms of that aspect. That's really the only reason why I would even consider even looking at this phone is because of that. But I also do appreciate what it brought to the table. It brought a lot. It brought the 1080p display. It brought a little bit of a slimmer design from the S3, so you do kind of have to give it that. Now, in terms of the specs inside, it has an Exynos 5410 octa chipset. Believe it or not, an octa-core CPU clocked at 1.6 gigahertz and 2 gigabytes of RAM. With all those specs, honestly, I'm surprised it had an octa-core CPU. I'll tell you like this, because it's on Android Lollipop, it doesn't seem too slow, okay? Because Android Lollipop wasn't really made for, the newest devices, phones with 10 gigabytes of RAM. It's really made for devices that came out around its time. And on stock, it doesn't seem that bad. I don't really like TouchWiz at all, like I said, but flying through apps and everything isn't that bad. It's when you start opening apps and updating apps, that's when things start really becoming super slow. And I'll say that for sure, that if you have multiple apps open in the background and everything, it's definitely gonna get bogged down. The performance really isn't that good. That's really one downside of this thing. When you're opening apps, when you have even a couple apps in the background and you go back to the other app, let's say you had 5 apps and you go back to the inner browser that you opened before, it will probably have shut down by that point. And that has a lot to do with the 2 gigabytes of RAM. TouchWiz really doesn't do a good job at optimizing. Well, maybe they do now, but at this time it was still kind of weird and just really bloated in my opinion. And I'll definitely say that Samsung has gone a long way since then, but I'll say that if you keep it stock, you're gonna have a weird time with RAM management. Now, in terms of playing games and everything, really, I was even surprised. Okay, Temple Run, it runs okay. Obviously, it's gonna run perfectly fine, but even games like Pew Pew, which is not that crazy intensive, it kind of is because there's a lot of graphics and stuff, but even with that game, it was actually kind of slowing down a little bit. It had a lot of chopped frames, a lot of missed frames here and there. Not that big of a deal. Like I said, if you need a game on a pinch, then you have that option, but it's still kind of weird that that was the case. I wasn't expecting it to be that low and graphical performance with that game especially. Now, one of the worst ones was Real Racing 3, which is expected because it's a super intensive game. I was not expecting it to be that choppy, but it was. And I don't know what to say at this point. I mean, obviously it's an old phone, and you guys have to remember, even though this phone isn't going to be updated anymore in terms of software, is not going to get Android 9 or whatever, this phone still is getting updates through the Play Store. So you have to remember, these games that are being updated are meant to be ran on phones that are at least on have 3 gigabytes of RAM or whatever, especially more intensive games. So you kind of have to remember that, and that's kind of bad for older generation phones. But also, like I said, it's expected. If you have a Samsung Galaxy S4, this might be a wake-up call to go and update to another phone or a newer phone or whatever. But in terms of raw graphical performance, you will have a choppy experience on even basic games like Pew Pew, which isn't too basic, but I was surprised that it even was that choppy in my opinion. Now, moving on to a different topic, it does have a 13 megapixel camera on the back, and obviously it's nothing compared to what we have nowadays, but I will say that it's not horrible. Samsung had a reputation before, being the best in class of camera, and they kind of still are a little bit. They're still up there for sure, but I think Google Pixel really knocked it out of the park. Their stock camera app is pretty weird. It's really choppy, and it just goes to show how far we've came since the beginning. I mean, this isn't even that long ago, 5 years, which is long, don't get me wrong. But I mean, this phone, I still see people rocking this phone, and the camera app is so laggy, it's insane. You take a photo, it does take a little minute to kind of render in the back, but it's really not that bad. The camera quality overall is a little strange, okay? I will say that under direct good lighting conditions, you can definitely get decent photos out of it. But I will say that even if you're in lighting conditions that are inadequate or even decent, the photos probably won't look that good. You do have a lot of features in the camera app, which is cool because Samsung really, like I said, they bloat their software up like crazy, but you don't have portrait mode or anything like that. But you are able to get those type of features with third-party apps and stuff like that. So I will say that the camera app is pretty weird looking, but the photos are decent. I'll rate the camera. I have to put it in age and everything like that. I'll probably say it's a 4.5, maybe 5 out of 10. Probably a little bit lower. It's probably a 4 out of 10. It's bad now, but at the time, I have to remember that it was pretty good at the time. You can shoot 1080p at up to 30 frames per second. It does have a 2 megapixel front facing camera, which also can shoot 1080p. But I mean, other than that, the front camera is honestly not that good at all. Probably rate a 2 out of 10. But yeah, that's pretty much enough for the camera. But this phone isn't horrible. One cool thing that it had, which I mentioned earlier, was the removable battery, and obviously the removable back, and it also had removable storage. Now, stock battery life is pretty bad, I'll say. It was 2,600 milliamp hours, but you would probably not be able to get a day. If I took my usage and put it on this, I probably couldn't get a day out of it. Believe it or not, I had the Samsung Galaxy S4 as a main phone for about a couple weeks when my LG G2 was being weird, and before I switched to an iPhone, I actually had a Galaxy S4, and even at that time, one thing that I remember off that was that this phone was heating up like crazy. This phone has a heating up problem, and that really kind of sucks battery life from it too, because I would just have this phone, I would just have Google Maps open, for example, and I would be walking to my class or something, and then all of a sudden I'd put it in my pocket, and my pocket would be burning up. I'm what the heck's happening? I thought my pants were catching on fire. I thought it was a liar or something. Lo and behold, the Samsung Galaxy S4 was just literally burning in my pocket, and I couldn't believe it. The LG G2 never really burned up that much, but that's one huge problem with this phone, is that it does heat up, and then battery life also gets suffocated at that point too. But what I will say is that since this phone does have a removable battery, you are able to go and not only put another battery of the same size, but you can also go and get a bigger removable battery too. So you can go and get, I think, a 5,000 or 10,000 milliamp hour battery at this point, and just put that in this phone and be set. So I'll say that for sure this phone has its quirks and weird things, but the removable battery is something that I wish every single phone had. One you can just pop off and just go to the store and get another battery or something. That'd be really sick. But in terms of that, that's pretty much the battery life. It's bad. It's definitely not good, but you are able to remove it and swap it out for another one immediately, so that it definitely has that advantage. Now, some other things to note: this phone does not have a fingerprint sensor, which at the time was not that noticeable. I mean, this phone did come out the same year as the 5S, and that's what pretty much pushed the fingerprint sensor initiative at the time. But it's okay. The speaker on this phone isn't really good either. It's only on the back. You can easily cover it. It's really not that good. You also have a headphone jack up top. No dual camera setup or anything like that. I mean, this is a dated phone. This phone's pretty old. What I will say though is this phone still worth it? I mean, it really depends, okay? If you have even $100 to spend, definitely don't get this phone. There's so many better options. I will say if you currently own this phone, then I would probably recommend updating, at least get a Galaxy S6 or S7, something that's been updated a little bit more. I mean, you're kind of putting yourself at risk if you get a phone at this age. But if you need a phone, let's say someone's selling it to you for $30, $40, you just want to to get it, maybe you want to resell it, or you're in a pinch and you just need a phone for like a couple weeks or something, then obviously this phone is, if it's your only option, then yeah, you can use it for a couple weeks or even like a month or two. Like nobody's gonna get hurt. But I'll say that if you plan on using this phone for a prolonged period of time, I probably wouldn't recommend it. Honestly, I probably would not recommend it. I mean, the specs on paper seem pretty good. 13 megapixel camera, 5-inch Super AMOLED screen, removable battery, removable storage, but I think the software is the main problem here, more so than the hardware. But like I said, you are able to root in custom ROM it. I'm sure there's at least like an Android Nougat ROM out for it. So that's a pretty decent option too. If you aren't comfortable with rooting a custom ROM in your phone, then definitely I would not recommend this phone. But if you are, then yeah, it doesn't hurt just to get it and root it in custom ROM it. I mean, that's what I did 2 years ago, and you can do the same thing too. So what I will say is this phone is only worth it to people who want to custom ROM it and root it. If you even have a little bit more money, go get a Galaxy S5 or a Galaxy S6. If you can get a Galaxy S7, that'll definitely be much better. I'll leave a link to a Galaxy S7 and a Galaxy S4 in the description below if you guys want to pick it up. Definitely buy things through that link in the description so you guys can help support the channel at the same time. I'd really appreciate it. But that is pretty much it. If you guys have any questions or anything like that, leave it down in the comment section below. Hit that like button, that'll mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber we get really does count, so it'll mean so much if you guys can hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my second channel, that means so much. I do a lot more iOS comparisons and stuff like that through my second channel, so I really appreciate it if you guys check it out. But more importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.